morning, everyone, and thank you so much for joining us. I'm Amy Dale, and I'll be running the behind-the-scenes controls on the platform today with my event team. Before I get started with introductions, I'm going to go over just a little bit of housekeeping first. Occasionally, as with any online platform, there may be a lag in the video feed, or it might freeze up for a moment. Don't panic if this happens. It'll likely catch up in about 30 seconds, and if it doesn't, you can just log out and log back in again. We're going to try to stick close to an hour this evening to be respectful of everyone's time. We'll have two parts to the evening. The first portion will be moderated questions, and the second part will be question and answer. Thank you so much to everyone who submitted questions for this evening. There were so many good questions. We'll address questions that haven't been addressed during part one in part two, the question and answer. When we get to the question and answer portion, we may have time for live questions at the end. Please use the question and answer feature located at the bottom of your screen to submit your questions. Even if we can't get to all the questions live, questions will be logged and saved so that we can circle back around to them after the close of the event. So, without further ado, let me introduce our panelists. Panelists, when I introduce you, please wave. In alphabetical order, we have Marckel Bonds. Marckel is a 2019 alumnus of Christopher Newport that is currently pursuing his MA in Media and Communication at Norfolk State University. While at CNU, Marckel was a change maker and student athlete. He was integral in bringing the importance of MLK Day to the forefront of campus in 2019 and founding the Multicultural Inclusiveness Board to better support students of color. Marckel has since developed his own digital media business, Coffee Black LLC, and worked with various candidates, campaigns, and elected officials on a local and state level in Virginia. Vidal Dickerson. Vidal is entering his fourth year as a special assistant to the Vice President of Student Affairs, where his focus is diversity, equity, and inclusion matters related to the student experience. His work includes student outreach and support, leadership development, education and training, community engagement, among other university efforts related to student access and opportunity. Chief Steve Drew. Chief Drew joined the Newport News Police Department in July of 2018 as the Chief of Police for the City of Newport News. Prior to this, Chief Drew served 25 years in the Richmond Police Department and retired in July 2018 as Deputy Chief. He received a Bachelor of Arts degree in Social Services from Urbana University and a Master's degree in Business from Colorado State University. Marlon Dubuisson. Marlon is the Outreach Director for Congressman Jerry Connolly and sits as the Young Adult Committee Chairman for the Fairfax County NAACP. Marlon received his undergraduate degree from Christopher Newport in 2017 and his master's in public policy from George Mason University. He is also the founder and president of a nonprofit at his former high school and has published articles as a freelance writer. Dr. Elizabeth Gagnon. Dr. Gagnon is a senior lecturer in leadership studies at Christopher Newport. She is also the academic director for the Center for Community Engagement, the director of the Minor in Civic Engagement and Social Entrepreneurship, and director of the Ferguson Fellowship Program. Dr. Kevin Hughes. Dr. Hughes has worked in higher education for over 25 years. Starting his career at Carnegie Mellon University, he has called Christopher Newport his home for the past 20 years and has served as the Dean of Students since 2008. Dr. Hughes also currently serves as CNU's Vice President for Student Affairs and chairs the university's Threat Assessment Team and is a member of the Emergency Policy Group and the University Policy Committee. Harry Lewis. Harry is a retired Chief of Police from the Pocono Mountain Regional Police Department in Pennsylvania and a parent of a current CNU student. During his tenure as police chief, he focused his leadership on creating community partnerships and underscoring the value of teamwork. Harry is also the founder and past president of the Pocono Mountain Regional Police Foundation, which was created to proactively raise funds for community-based programs such as Unity in the Community, PMR PD Community Education Series, mountain bike patrols, and the National Night Out. Sheriff Gabe Morgan. Sheriff Morgan has served as the Sheriff of Newport News since 2006. Upon taking office, Sheriff Morgan immediately instituted significant policy changes that support his guiding principles of justice for all, service to others, and abiding love for his community. Sheriff Morgan serves on a number of boards and commissions throughout the Hampton Roads area, including Christopher Newport University's Board of Visitors. Chief Dan Woloszynowski. Chief Dan is the Chief of Police at the Christopher Newport University Police Department and the retired resident agent in charge of the Norfolk, Virginia field of the Bureau of Alcohol, Tobacco, Firearms, and Explosives, ATF. Chief Dan is the Executive Committee Vice Chairman of the Hampton Roads Criminal Justice Training Academy, past Vice Chairman of the Board for the local Hampton Roads chapter of ACES International, a member of the International Association of Chiefs of Police and Virginia Association of Chiefs of Police. International Association of Campus Law Enforcement Administrators, and Virginia Association of Campus Law Enforcement Administrators, and a proud member of the Association of Former Agents of the United States Secret Service. Thank you so much to all of our panelists for joining us this evening. Now, I'd like to formally introduce you to our host and our moderator for this evening, Dr. Angela Spranger, the reason that we're all here tonight. Dr. Angela Spranger is Christopher Newport University's Chief Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion Officer. She's been a respected member of our faculty for 8 years and serves as Assistant Professor of Management in the Lutter School of Business, a faculty core advisor, and advisor to the student chapter of the Society of Human Resources Management. Dr. Spranger holds a doctorate in organizational leadership from Regent University, a Master of Arts in Education in Human and Organizational Learning from George Washington University, a Master of Business Administration from Virginia Commonwealth University, and a Bachelor of Arts in Psychology from Duke. I'm very grateful to Dr. Spranger for taking on this important work and leading us through this evening. Dr. Spranger, the floor is yours.
I am willing to yield the floor for us to introduce our friend Blakely Lockhart.
My sincerest apologies. I think I wasn't scrolled all the way back up.
I have a huge panel, I know.
Hold on one second. I just closed my thing. There we go. I've got it. Okay. Blakely Lockhart is a student from Henrico, Virginia. She's a senior and she's studying neuroscience with a minor in leadership and biology. She's organized our Black Lives Matter protest called Keeping the Momentum back in June, and she's currently working to reactivate our NAACP chapter on CNU's campus. She is an absolute gem of a student, and we're so glad to have her tonight.
Yes, thank you so much, Amy. Good evening, and thank you to all of our panelists and everyone who registered. I am honored to have you join with us on our first Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion Dialogue Series event. In accordance with the One Virginia Strategic Plan, and following the example of the Commonwealth's first Chief Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion Officer, Dr. Janice Underwood, I collaborate with all departments and units across CNU on implementation of the university's D&I strategic plan. I am engaging with diverse stakeholders and constituents in the CNU community to increase our inclusive excellence. We are developing a sustainable framework for the continuation of inclusive practices across CNU, and we're identifying a university-wide assessment to evaluate inequities within our formal and informal systems, our processes, our leaders, our policies, and our overall logistics, with the explicit purpose of measuring the baseline climate, assessing the diversity profile, and determining the readiness for change at CNU. Tonight's launch of the DEI Dialogue Series is one example of creating a sustainable framework for inclusive practices, among other things. This dialogue series will help us evaluate perceptions around the 5 key areas from the Inclusive Excellence Framework: access and success, climate and relations, training and education, infrastructure, and community engagement. To that end, registrants for tonight's session can expect a brief survey coming your way after the event. But going into this school year, I felt that after all the events on the national stage this year, it would be appropriate to sit down together and have a dialogue. My preference would have been over a meal, but to have a dialogue about what policing and public safety at CNU looks like, who our resources are. Many of us work an entire career at CNU and never encounter CNU police, or complete a full 4-year degree at CNU and never know the difference between the Newport News Police Department and the Newport News Sheriff's Office. I'd like to change that. On the national level, there are calls to defund police departments, to insist on training and retraining, to provide enhanced mental health counseling first responders to support police. In many places, change is needed. But right here, right now, at Christopher Newport University, I wanted to create space for us to learn together, to get some information about what our current state is, and to move forward together. This is our university, our community. So tonight is about listening, learning from one another, and then talking about opportunities for making change effectively. We in the administration and faculty at CNU want our students to perform SWOT and gap analysis, to learn about their resources and the procedures to deploy those resources, and manage relationships effectively. Can't help it, I was a business professor, I gotta put that in there. So okay, enough from me, let's get started. My first question is geared to Chief Dan, and I do humbly ask that you try to keep your response to about 5 minutes. All right, we've been hearing more and more frightening reports about interactions with the police nationwide. What should students, faculty, and staff at CNU know about policing at Christopher Newport? Can you provide an overview of what the CNU Police Department is, what services you provide, what issues you face?
Can you hear me now? Fantastic. Let me jump right in. Thank you all for sharing your time with me tonight. I certainly appreciate being first because with a last name that begins with a W, I'm usually last. So again, I appreciate the opportunity. It's an honor to be here and to share some thoughts and information with each of you. I hope you gain some valuable takeaways, and I know my time is short, so I do want to jump right in and begin to frame my response to the question. So I'm going to do it in 3 ways. It's going to be A, B, C, because I really want you to have some takeaways. And so what the first A is, what are we? What are we here at CNU Police? And why do we do what we do? And lastly, how do we do it? So let me start again with what we are. What we are and what we hope we are to you, our guardians. And you, the community members, are in our care, and that's how we think about you. And our number one priority is that people not only need to be safe in our community, but we want you to feel safe in our community. And here at CNU, under my leadership, we take something that I refer to as a heart-focused approach. And that is the way that we interact with each other, both internally and externally. Very simply, we care about others, and we understand the concept that people never forget how we make them feel. So we want to show you respect as a community. No matter one's transgressions, every human being will be treated fairly and with dignity and respect. I want to refer to something called procedural justice with regard to fair and impartial policing. Fair and impartial policing is the idea of fairness in the policing process to resolve disputes and to allocate resources. Sort of a definition there. But let me just break it down. It promotes positive change and better relationships. It has 4 principles. We need to be fair. We need to be transparent. We need to give you an opportunity for a voice, and we need to listen. And we need to be impartial in our decision making. It's the key to building trust, which is what this is all about. So why do we do what we do? And this is my favorite part, really. The mission at Christopher Newport University Police Department is to simply add value to others each and every day. And while that might sound easy, it requires my officers to show people that they care. As human beings, that's one of the things that people can sense immediately, and I think we all know what I'm saying here. You know when others don't care about you, and that's not going to happen, not under my watch. If people know you care, if people know you're committed, you will earn their trust, and relationships cannot develop without trust. So how are we going to build trust? In 2015, President Obama's task force, it was called the 21st Century Policing Task Force, and they completed a study and developed recommendations for best practices in law enforcement. It's a tremendous document, and I hope you get to read it. It'll frame everything that I'm talking about right here, because I use it as a guide, quite frankly. And it tells us how police practices can basically promote effective crime reduction while we build trust with the public, with our citizens, with the people that we are the guardians for. Here at CNU Police, we strive to incorporate those recommendations into action items to support our community policing initiatives. The task force recommendations they break them down into pillars, and I'm not going to go into all 6, but I do want to touch on 2. And pillar number 1 is building trust and legitimacy. I think that I've already mentioned that. With you, the community, it provides a basis for transparency, accountability, legitimacy, addresses bias, and it incorporates the guardian mindset. Very simply, transparency and accountability equals public trust and legitimacy. And if we can do that, we're really doing well. We're communicating. The second pillar is policy and oversight. And this is something that everybody is interested right now. We ensure that accountability is paramount. We exercise our values here. And when I left the Secret Service many years ago, I brought with me the Secret Service adage, which was worthy of trust and confidence. And I ensure every day that the men and women of this police department make themselves worthy of trust and confidence. And we're consistent with reviewing our policies and procedures. And for example, we require officers to intervene to stop wrongdoing or excessive force. And there's a duty to report excessive force. We don't allow chokeholds in our policy, clearly defines the use of force continuum, and we require officers to de-escalate unstable situations through crisis intervention training, which is mandatory beginning in 2017 when I got here for all police officers and dispatchers. We also complete cultural diversity training, which is mandated as part of Department of Criminal Justice Services in Virginia as a minimum compulsory training standard. And we identify additional diversity training opportunities. I'm timing myself, and I think I'm kind of running out, but if I can wrap it up by saying, building and maintaining trust and legitimacy in our community policing effort here at Christopher Newport, we're always leaning forward. We're always working together through my Police Chiefs Advisory Council, which is a multicultural group in my department. We meet and we talk about problem solving and how we can engage in our community. And I have a whole lot more to say, but I'm going to cut myself off before I embarrass myself and get cut off. But I just want to tell you, I am willing, I am here. I love to talk, as people who know me realize, double-edged sword, right? But I am more than willing to have a discussion. I love eyeball to eyeball, but we'll wear our masks and be safe if we do that. So in closing, remember, we do care. We are committed. We will work every day to earn your trust and to add value to others each day.
Thank you so much, Chief Dan. Thank you. It's always a pleasure for me to talk with you. And I know that our listeners, our participants, are looking forward to hearing more from you. So we'll come back around to you shortly. And just as a reminder, we will definitely come to the questions that are posted in the chat. What I heard Chief Dan say, though, is that, of course, there are no chokeholds used according to policy. They have a requirement for officers to intervene if they see something going on that shouldn't be. They do crisis intervention training and diversity training of multiple types. So we can kind of circle back to you, Chief Dan, about that maybe in a little bit, okay, if you want to share some more about that. But the next question is geared to Sheriff Gabe. In light of the fact that we're a university situated in a city of about 179,000 people, can you help our listeners understand the difference between, or the relationship between, the Sheriff's Office and the Newport News Police Department?
Yes, thank you for having me, and I appreciate the efforts of this panel and Christopher Newport as a whole, as it tries to ensure that everyone is safe and feel welcome on campus. For those that may have been on earlier, may have heard me going back and forth with Chief Drew, and one of the things that I speak to all the time is one team, one fight. From a student's perspective, there is no difference for them. If they are stopped on the street by a sheriff's office, deputy or police officer, the response is basically the same. But from a division of work, because the city is a incorporated city, the chief of police is charged with calls for service and basic law enforcement, and I handle everything else. So I do civil enforcement, corrections, and court security. My position is a constitutional officer. I am elected every 4 years. I am the executive officer of the court. Every action that comes out of the court comes across my desk. The judge will say, I order so-and-so, but the judge will never get off the bench and go out there and do it. so anytime the judge says, I order X, that means he's telling me to go do something. We're authorized to enforce both civil and criminal law. And the differentiation on that is sometimes you may have a dispute, say they're living off campus and they're roommates, and they may have a dispute with their roommate. The police department will not put them out or try to get in between that dispute. One of the first things the police department will say to them is, we can't handle civil issues. You have to go to court, or that's a civil issue. You got to go to the magistrate or whatever. So on the other hand, the sheriff's office will handle civil issues within our jurisdiction, and sometimes throughout the entire state, depending on the orders that are put forth. The sheriff's office, they will write you a ticket, just like the police department will write you a ticket. They will answer services if it's a critical call, and then thereby they will respond. If the police department is backed up, they will start taking calls. So, it's truly one team, one fight. So from the students' perspective, there is no difference. We serve on all the same task force, DEA, ATF, terrorism, so seamlessly, no difference for the students. Operationally, just a division of work.
Gotcha. Thank you so much, Sheriff Gabe. Let's see. This question is for Chief Drew. When might there be some overlap for CNU students, faculty, or staff in terms of dealing with CNU PD and Newport News PD?
That's a great question. And before I start, I'll be as brief as I can, but also try to be as thorough. I'm very humbled, and thank you for letting me be part of this panel discussion. I see Ms. Lockhart and Mr. Bonds. I'm glad to see you both tonight. It's good to have some conversation with you. So first of all, I think it's important for the students and all of us to realize that we have a great working relationship. I think we're very fortunate to have a great working relationship in this city, not only with Chief Dan and his team there at CNU, Gabe Morgan, who's a mentor, who's one of the first people I met when I came here, and he still continues. We have just a great partnership and information sharing. So some ways that you might see some overlap, a lot of it, Sheriff Morgan just talked about supplementing manpower. Some ways that you may see us interact with CNU is if there were a need for some type of forensics, pending, if the police department there asked for our assistance, we would use our forensics team that may come to assist to process some type of, whether it could be a device with the bomb team and the fire department, or a threatening letter, or if there were some type of assault, we may utilize our forensics, our intelligence division that is able to, a lot of times people will solicit threats like we get at schools. There'll be emails that we're going to do this to a school, or we're going to do this to a particular school. We have devices that are able to work with our federal partners as well as local to tap into where did that threat come from, where did it originate from, where did that device, what area, and we're able to respond there and share that information. And everything we talk about, it's always going to go back to information sharing. It's like Sheriff Morgan said, that the relationship. Chief Dan can pick up the phone and call me anytime, and I feel the same way, as well as Sheriff Morgan and what we do in the city. But we may assist with assaults. We may interact with, if something were to happen to a student off campus, one of the first things we would do is reach out to the CNU Police Department and share that information, or vice versa, right? If something were to happen on campus, if there was a threat that came from outside, that we may collaborate. And I think that's important, is when we talk about our different jurisdictions, to be able to have those partnerships and relationships that we can work together. A tactical situation, God forbid that would ever happen, but the same thing, Sheriff Morgan talked a lot about our training. If a tactical situation, let's take like an active shooter at any school. We're all trained the same. You may get a sheriff that responds first, someone from CNU, and a Newport News police officer. We don't have to wait just for our own entities. We all have that same training. We changed that after what happened in Columbine. So you may see a lot of those interactions. You may see traffic enforcement around on Warwick Boulevard primarily. We have two main thoroughfares through Newport News. It's not too hard to get lost, right? We're very linear, so it's north and south. If you can find Warwick and Jefferson, Sheriff Morgan made it very clear to me, you can find your way around Newport News. So, but we may help with traffic accidents. If there's needs of reports that need to be filed and you need copies of those things, here at the 9700 block of Jefferson Avenue, students can pick up reports that they may need if there had been an accident. But we would work with you, all of those things, and the CNU Police Department certainly has that access as well if anything's needed. I don't like a lot of red tape. We don't have time for that in today's age. Everything moves so much quicker. So I think it's important that I share information, that we share information with anything that we may get through sources, through our federal partners, anything that I need to get to Sheriff Morgan or get to the CNU Chief Dan, we're going to do that. And I expect our officers to have good working relationships and work together. So those may be some ways, and you also may see us with training. We train together. We attend classes together. So you may see interactions there. You may see some officers on campus that are, I got to go a little bit and partner last year with one of the classes. They did a study on us about different areas of our city and in relation to traffic enforcement and traffic accidents. So those type things, but I think it's just really important. If I was answering one way on this question, is just the collaboration and the partnership and sharing information that we have.
Gotcha. Thank you so much, Chief Drew. And we're going to come back around to you too. But first, I do want to make sure to get to, so the first part of the panel obviously is the law enforcement officials. And then the next part of the panel is going to be our social justice speakers. So I have one or two more questions, and then we'll move to social justice. Vice President Kevin Hughes, if a student does have an encounter with CNU police or with the Newport News Police, what should they do next?
Got to remember to unmute. Thank you all for giving me the opportunity. And I really appreciate the large audience that's here investing time in what is clearly a critical issue, not only in the country and the Commonwealth, but our city and on our campus. So I took this question, and the way I read it was, if there's a concern or an issue with an interaction with CNU police in particular, what should they do next? And so the first thing I would say is I would encourage you to have a conversation with Chief. You know, he has very high expectations, and he wouldn't be in the role if he didn't have those high expectations. But certainly if you feel like I need to talk to somebody outside the police department, I'm not sure what to do. I'm not sure how to navigate this. I'm not sure what even my options are. I would ask that you reach out to me, and I will certainly help a student try and navigate what some of those things are. Make them aware of what some of the options could be. If there are formal steps that are necessary, and talk very broadly about what some of those formal steps might entail, and certainly encourage a student to capture the specific issues that are of concern, what they were worried about, what their interaction was like, and to provide that level of detail. Because sometimes if we're in a situation where there needs to be an investigation into the behavior, there's a formal process that the police department needs to follow. And I want to make sure that a student is prepared for sharing some of that information and then connecting them to, this is how that process begins. This is where that process might lead, and understand that there are steps that the police department has to follow based on their internal affairs requirements and the requirements of the law enforcement and laws related to doing some internal affairs investigations. So recognize that most of us, regardless of our role, don't interact regularly with police. And if they have an issue, if I have an issue, I may not know what to do. And so start by, if you're not sure if you can have an interaction with the police department, you're not sure what it looks like, come see me, reach out to me. I will certainly, try and navigate that with you. I don't want anybody to feel like I have nowhere to go, so I'm just going to stay quiet, because that doesn't help us get better. And ultimately, that's what this is about. We're talking about a community policing approach, and the emphasis there is on community. And every person in this is part of our community. And if students aren't sure where to go, how do we make sure that I can help navigate that for them? And so that's what I would offer to somebody if they're not sure what to do.
Great, thank you, Dean Hughes. I'm going to go ahead and start our shift to the other side of the panel, but first I'd love a little, maybe a wrap-up type comment from our CNU parent, Harry Lewis. What words of wisdom do you have? What do you hope all of our CNU students know and do as they establish themselves as young adults living away from home, many for the first time? What advice do you have?
I'm honored to be a part of this conversation. It's, I have one of the easier questions. In my former life, I would be on the panel answering all the difficult ones. So it's nice to be on this side, as a dad. It's an empowering time for these kids. And I know it's a difficult time, especially in this time with the virus and all, but I know they're trying to do the right thing. Now with these young adults is a very empowering time in their lives. But now that they're young adults and they're over the age of 18, things count. And what I mean by that is, their behavior on and off campus, they have consequences, and they have to be aware of that. Their consequences, good or bad, are relevant. Their bad consequences may affect them later in life when they try and get a job. Things that they post on social media have consequences. And then I always say, you got to make good decisions because it's going to follow you. Everything counts. My second point that I always preach is that, when you go into a new environment like college, people don't think like you. People come from all different places, all different backgrounds. So you must respect what they have to say. You have to listen. Everybody has value, and everybody has something different to offer. So you have to listen. Just because they disagree with you doesn't mean they're wrong. Doesn't mean you're right. So you have to be able to listen, and you have to be able to respect what other people have to say, because everybody brings something to the table, because we all have our different experiences. And the last thing I would like to say is that everyone needs to be a leader, especially at CNU. Leadership is such an important part. And in order to be a leader, you have to be able to follow. I think people have to understand is, I always say don't be a follower, but you can follow as long as you follow the right people. You need to follow the people that are doing the right things for the right reasons. And then if you do that, and you do what you're supposed to do, if you follow the professor's instructions, if you follow your coaches, if you follow the people that are doing the right things, then things are probably going to work out for you. If you follow people that are just doing things to do things. And I think, especially with now that you see things on TV or social media, I really hope that people get the facts before they act on something. You're at the point where you can do your own research. The data is out there. Do what you need to do and form your own opinion. Like I said, it's a very empowering time. You can have a tremendous impact on life. Just do your research, do the right things, and have a good time, but behave yourselves. Now is the time to do things, do it the right way, be a good student, be a good teammate, be a good friend, be a good community leader, and also be a good captain. So I appreciate the time, and I appreciate the opportunity to speak before everybody.
Thank you so much, Harry. It's a pleasure to have you. Now, I do want to go ahead and make our shift to the social justice focus, but I'll remind all of our participants, because it's been brought to my attention, if people have questions that they want to submit now, like during the panel, please feel free to enter them in the Q&A box down at the bottom of your screen. Just click on Q&A and enter your question there. The chat function has been disabled so that all questions can be captured in the Q&A. Now, so switching to part two, because I know everybody's been wondering, like, only a few people have spoken so far. I'd like to pull Dr. Gagon to the front and move on to our related topic, social justice at CNU. Would you please speak briefly to the opportunities for student engagement in social justice issues at CNU, Dr. Gagon?
Yes, I'm so happy to be able to have the opportunity to do that. There's many opportunities for students to engage in social justice on campus and off campus. First, we have a minor in civic engagement and social justice. In this minor, it's very much an applied minor where we learn what social justice is, because while social justice is a word that we hear a lot, not all of us can define it and understand it or perceive it the same way. So the minor does a lot of creating baseline knowledge and learning about how to talk about issues of social justice. The minor also encourages community engagement components. And so engaging in the minor is one way to be involved in social justice, but there's others. We have a Center for Community Engagement. We regularly give fellowships for students who want to take on some kind of a project that that enhances the community in some way. And so those fellowships are available for students who, with mentoring and help to, excuse me, to engage in the community in a way that maybe they see a need. The other thing that we have, the Center for Community Engagement, we have many community partners. Many of our students engage in education, they engage in immigration services, they engage in issues of hunger and homelessness. And the more an individual wants to engage in those areas, the better, because there's just so many opportunities. And the community is really hungry. Our partners are hungry to have students who want to stand alongside of them and engage in these issues with them. Another thing I'd like to mention, looking forward to some of the questions that were asked, is how do we have these conversations on campus? We need to have conversations. When we talk about social justice, one of the most important things that we all have to learn, students, faculty, staff, all of us, is how to talk about social justice, is how to talk about these issues. These kinds of meetings as this are very helpful. We are also looking, so I'm going to put a big plea out there, we are looking to develop a student-led series on talking about social justice issues and would like to fund that through the Center for Community Engagement. So if there are students out there who are interested in taking the lead on something like that, we want to fund you, we want to help you, we want to mentor you, because we want to have as much conversation on campus as we possibly can have surrounding these issues.
Wonderful, and I know that you got some interest aroused out there with that last comment. So thank you so much, Dr. Gagon. And I love the fact that you raised, the point of this session is to demonstrate the power and the actual beauty of civil conversation. And that's not an easy thing, right? Like the idea of assembling 10 people, assigning them only a few moments and 1 or 2 questions each, and creating the structure, right, the firm structure to try to get through all of those questions and still address open Q&A does require some discipline. And so a lot of folks are kind of wishing that we could be more loose and free form, and maybe we'll try that next time. But I wanted to point out how important it is and how good it is, how beautiful it can be when we can have a simple civil discourse. And yes, we will get to questions. So sorry, I'm off the page, stick to the page. There may be some student organizations that specifically address these social justice issues. Dr. Gagon has mentioned a few, but would you speak to those from the student affairs viewpoint, please? Mr. Vidal Dickerson.
Thank you, and I appreciate being invited to this space, which I recognize, which may be a continuation of conversations as a number of students, faculty, staff, and alumni have been engaged really since May, wrestling with social justice issues, but also wrestling with really death and trauma that's been highlighted, particularly within the Black community. And so I'll layer my response not only to highlight some of those organizations, but also to highlight how students have organized. And I say that particularly because our student organizations, of course, are extensions and are the structures that we have at place on the campus. But if you consider particularly around May, we had pivoted virtually, and also we were at the decline of the academic year. So a great number of our students and our leaders particularly were already linked to their respective communities. So a few organizations that we definitely highlight, there are some of our staples. Of course, we have our Black Student Union, our Latino Student Association, our Asian Student Union, which exist to provide a presence and a networking space for the respective communities, particularly at a predominantly white institution. And all of these organizations highlight social issues that impact their communities, but also I've appreciated the solidarity in their programming when there are issues that impact across communities, whether it's related to education, representation, civil rights, just a number of areas. And what was impressive about this group as well, as immediately following George Floyd's death, this group collectively responded and used social media as a vehicle to provide education, particularly about the ways to engage in activism, whether it's engaging with protests, whether it's going back into your respective communities or workplaces, how to engage and go further with work. And they also did a great deal of fundraising for George Floyd's family and to the Black Lives Matter national body. Another organization, you heard actually in an introduction of Mr. Bonds, the Multicultural Inclusiveness Board, which is a relatively new organization, but been very active. And so they actually explore not only support across communities, but look at social issues impacting multiple communities. And in an impressive way, created a dialogue series that focused on a range of topics from the Black experience on campus to being an ally, and even invited faculty to the space to explore inclusive curricula. We have the Student Diversity and Equality Council, also known as SDEC, which has a great focus on student community building and advocacy. There's a lot around policy recommendations, education and programming. And over the summer also partnered with our Student Government Association to host a conversation around diversity representation at CNU, which actually featured Dr. Spranger and Dr. Hughes. Of course, I can't forget our Greek-led organizations, particularly our fraternities and sororities of National Panhellenic Council, who actually have national histories related to civil rights and other social movements. And so a great number of those groups took part in community actions locally and around the state. And lastly, and certainly not least, our recent addition, who just took us all by storm, is our incoming student chapter of the NAACP that has had an active presence both on campus and locally in Newport News. But I also want to highlight, again, there are a number of organizations that don't necessarily have a focus or a mission related to social justice, but definitely stepped up to the plate, engaged in the community in a range of ways. So I definitely want to highlight our religious and spiritual organizations that provided both active and symbolic ways to respond to our racial tensions during this time. Our Bonner Scholars that formed the Colleges for Equality effort, which involved week-long dialogues representing, I pretty much 17, 18 organizations across the state, even out of the state. I think they had North Carolina universities represented as well. Even our student athletes were very active, both in fundraising and fundraise not just to support efforts that exist statewide and nationally. They actually fundraise to support efforts in our communities here. So I was very proud and very impressed by that coordination. And then also a last example is how our student athletes partner with some of our surrounding communities to establish the 757 Student Athlete Coalition for Social Change. And they had a unity walk over the summer as well. So a number of organizations are dedicated, doesn't represent the individual efforts, and also some of the other efforts that maybe not have been maybe reported or we've captured in some way. But certainly a body of individuals, a body of active student organizations that are dedicated to moving forward with the work.
Thank you. Wow. Between Dr. Gagnon and Vidal, it sounds like there are lots of opportunities for our students to reach out and get connected. But we're so pleased to actually have a representative from one of those organizations, Blakely Lockhart. Blakely, you've done some high impact, high visibility things this year. What reflections do you have to share? What lessons learned? And what are you looking forward to next?
Hi everyone, I am a senior here at Christopher Newport, and I just also want to throw out that I study neuroscience and I minor in leadership and biology. I am so happy to be here tonight. I would also like to preface that I am a woman of color and I am a student of color that has been uplifting the Black Lives Matter movement. I am not a part of this Sunrise movement or Antifa. I am simply a concerned student of color who does not think that people should be murdered based off of their skin color. I am disappointed that I am the only woman and student of color speaking tonight, but I hope that the future panels will have more representation. To start, one of CNU's biggest problems is that they are reactive and not proactive. Now, what do I mean by this? CNU has been in the news quite a bit lately for multiple things, including the poor response by our administration on the Black Lives Matter movement, the different student reactions to the administration, I am one of those students, the almost plagiarized Juneteenth email, the protests that have happened on campus, and the marches that the students have participated in have all been across news channels and social media. Personally, I have planned the Keeping the Momentum protest. It was the second protest to happen here on campus in June. It was pretty loud. We blocked off the streets and had a couple of news crews. And sure enough, we got CNU administration's attention. What I find disappointing is that it took these protests and these marches and the bad publicity of CNU, along with the exposure of racism at CNU, for administration to take action. This has led me to reactivate the NAACP. My hope and goals for this chapter is to use it as a unifying organization on campus. The NAACP is not only for Black people. It is for any and all people who want to help support, be an ally, and share experiences together. The organization is focused on providing educational resources, civic engagement specifically relating to voting and voter registration, and obviously has a social justice component as well. We want the surrounding community to know that students care about the gentrification of Newport News because of our university. We want to begin to make amends, not ever to say that we can make up for the damage that our university has done. Going back to the social justice component, we held a protest last week. It was on the second day of class. This protest allowed students to share their grievances and frustration, but also to demonstrate to other students that we care and we can all form a community together that is stronger of people who do not tolerate any form of racism or act of hatred towards minority groups. The general feelings of students on campus are distrust, pain, frustration, and fear. The CNU administration has sent emails that confirm the favoritism that was already on our campus. It just made it more obvious and blatant. The distaste towards groups that help minorities on campus has always been evident. The past summer has shown that it is very clear, in a very clear way through emails and other actions. Change starts at the lower levels, but it means nothing without administration and the people at the top promoting that change. But what does this change look like? This change can take forms in many ways, including hiring more diverse faculty that can be mentors to students of color. It can be creating transition programs for first-generation students. It can be adding diverse and inclusive curriculum to the liberal learning core that all students must follow at our university. It can be holding panel discussions that include students with all different backgrounds to promote productive discourse. And lastly, it can look like reallocating funds that go towards our campus police vehicles towards counseling services for CNU students. CNU has the opportunity to do many things, and I look forward to seeing each of these initiatives come to fruition in the future. Our university president continually preaches to set the world on fire. Guess what, President Tribble? I think you should be very proud. We are setting the world on fire and we are rebuilding this country from the ground up. Thank you so much for having me.
Wow. Thanks so much, Blakely. She had a lot for us there to work with. We're also honored to have two of our CNU alumni with us tonight. So what advice would you give to current students about engaging in social activism on campus and beyond? This one is for Marlon Dubuisson.
Great, thank you. Part of being a community activist and working in politics is all about compromise, civility, and dialogue. But most importantly, it's about action and results. When the iron is hot, you have to strike. Too often, students of color have felt out of place at a university, which is their second home. Too often, employees of color feel out of place at a job that they care about. And too often, people of color feel out of place because they are weaponized in today's American society. So when we see trauma on social media of Black people being murdered, it's a problem. When we hear of issues of mental health calls gone wrong due to excessive force, it's a problem. When we have underfunded schools around CNU and underfunded social services, but overfunded law enforcement budgets and overcrowded prisons, it's a problem. The last 4 months have been centered around social justice and what this country needs to do going forward to change the racist, systematic issues that have plagued us for too long. Tonight, CNU had a chance to have that open and honest dialogue with the student body, staff, alumni, parents, community stakeholders, and many more individuals. Open and honest dialogue is the only way we lay a stronger foundation to empower and uplift each other, to take action, and of course, as President Tribble likes to say, set the world on fire. Unfortunately, President Tribble and CNU went down a more performative route, went down a comfortable route, and went down a route that we've been going for too long. Because on this road, we know where we're gonna end up. On this road, we end up back at square one. When I heard about this conversation, I was hopeful that CNU would detour from the more comfortable and old-fashioned route of taking time to progress. Without honest, uncomfortable, and robust conversation about why we have had only 12 days in 2020 where someone hasn't died at the hands of police, about why a Black woman can be shot in her bed without justice, or why a Black man can be killed on camera with a knee on his neck, and more people are upset about a $20 check than his death. Those are the conversations that needed to be focused on immediately. Civil rights leader James Baldwin said, "You always told me that it takes time. It's taking my father's time, it's taking my mother's time, it's taking my uncle's time, it's taking my brothers and my sisters' time. How much more time do you need for your progress?" This generation, my generation, is done struggling. We're done waiting. We're here to take bold and immediate change, and we urge CNU to put forth real action for real results. This is the fire that you cannot put out. I yield my time.
Thank you so much. These folks have a lot for us, and I'm very interested to hear the actual recommendations of what we here at CNU can do going forward. So I'm going to allow the last prepared comments from Marckel, and then we'll start responding to, if it's all right with you panelists, the questions that were submitted. I'm sure actually some of the comments have probably aroused some responses from some of our panelists too. So you can be preparing your thoughts. And we don't have too much time, but Marckel, please, in your allotted time, what reflections do you have about your experience at CNU and how it has prepared you for your current endeavors?
Good evening. Thank you for having me this evening. I'm glad to be on here with the other fellow panelists. Chief Drew, hello, how are you doing? Chief Sheriff Gabe Morgan, I've talked to you recently. Dean Hughes, how are you doing? Obviously Marlon and Blakely. But today we're talking about being seen. Oh, can you hear me? Okay, yeah, today we're talking about being seen, safe, and heard at CNU and in our surrounding community, and we're talking about social justice. So just to give those who don't know a makeup or a picture of CNU, CNU is less than 8% Black. A fellow teammate of mine, Andre Turan, wrote a great article about that was published in the Captain's Log. And I know that someone earlier suggested a student-led series of conversations based on social justice, social injustice, and things of that nature. But I would encourage you to look into the organizations that are already established and the conversations they have already been having. I graduated in 2019 and I went to multiple conversations almost every month, hosted by either Black Student Union, different organizations. Malik Dickens was a former president of the Black Student Union. He actually was funded through Ferguson to have a survey and a study that we also presented to President Tribble. Dean Hughes was there as well. Provost Dowdy was there. Jim Hanchin was there. He's the head of communication. So we have presented action items to the university. I'm also part of the Multicultural Alumni Association. We have presented action items towards the university. So those are there. And I also want to talk about what I feel most strongly about is making sure that our staff and our students are seen, safe, and heard, as put in our title. I know someone also referenced the Center for Community Engagement earlier. I graduated with service distinction. I've worked at the Boys and Girls Club since 2017, and CNU is very selective of the neighborhoods that they choose to be involved with. Underserved communities and often minority communities are often avoided by the university. It's very clear the heteronormative culture that exists on our campus and the makeup of the students that we have on our campus that contributes to minority students not feeling safe, seen, or unheard on campus. I want to reference the police, since there are so many on the Zoom. My only encounters with CNU PD have either been at events that we've had as Black Student Union or MIB, Multicultural Inclusiveness Board, such as a cookout. Police would see the need to come to our cookout rather than other students' cookouts of other organizations who look differently than us. And there's a clear disconnect between CNU and, like I said, underserved communities. And the lack of diversity in our administration kind of just trickles down to the students. And there are many opportunities, as so eloquently put by a lot of people, to get involved with social justice on campus and different organizations because there is so much injustice on campus that has been unheard or unchanged for so long. And a big part of what we really need to be talking about is, just like Marlon was saying, is this Black Lives Matter movement. Not a single police officer on here said the words Black or Lives Matter while they were speaking, not knocking them or anything like that. But I think that I'm just trying to put into perspective that we're not only talking about policing. Social injustice is not something that can be separated from any conversation. It's something that is ingrained in our society. So you should always speak about it, speak deliberately and intentional about it. I've personally been racial profiled by CNU PD. My freshman year, me and my roommate were required to show our ID to prove that we were even students. I'm sure that didn't happen to any of my cohorts on campus. And I know someone mentioned the makeup of Newport News having 180,000 citizens, 50% plus of these citizens are minority, right? CNU is almost 85+% white. So the gentrification led by President Paul Tribble is clear on our campus. There is a lot of tokenization of Black leaders in moments of anguish, just like Marlon said. A lot of things happen in response. So I know that for most of the people who look like me in CNU, whether they're administration, staff, whether they're a janitor, whether they work in dining, whether they're a student, do not feel safe, seen, and unheard. The median cost of living for a family of four in Newport News is around $80,000. CNU staff, such as dining, such as custodial services, make around $22,000 a year. So that would mean if you have a family of four, all four of your family members will have to work at CNU in order to provide for yourself. We have a young woman who works in Chick-fil-A that's been there for years, motherly type people on, I know y'all probably gonna cut me off, but Ms. Vita works at CNU. We have multiple staff members who have to take the bus to our university. President Tribble makes $100,000 a year. Instead of raising the pay of these workers, they gave a fraternity an award for driving this worker to and from campus, right? Why would you, give an award for someone dispelling your injustices instead of changing them? So I think another thing we really need to focus on is transition from high school to college for low-income, minority-based students so that they can actually sustain at CNU. I know we have the Community Captains Initiative, but it's very important to make sure that these kids mentored to actual success, making sure that they have all the resources, even if their tuition is covered. Will there be food services or a food bank that they can go to if they can't provide for themselves in a sense? But
okay, if you would like to have some answers to some of the things that you raised, I'd love for you to leave space for some of the panelists to respond. Is that okay?
oh yeah, that's definitely
Because
okay.
you did definitely raise some things that you can get some answers to tonight.
Right. Okay,
Right.
awesome. And I
Okay.
put a question in there earlier for the chief of police for CNU.
Okay, so we'll see what we can get to because we're at 8:02. Thank you so much, Marckel. Wow. Okay. So I'm not going to try to answer anything. I'm going to go over here to the list of questions. We want to make sure that we respect the time and energy and effort that the people who registered for this webinar took to enter their questions. There were several questions that were entered that go to something that Marckel was talking about, and I think that Marlon had mentioned, having to do with Black Lives Matter. Of course, I guess Blakely too, right? What is CNU doing to ensure the safety of the Black community and provide resources? How are we supporting Black Lives Matter on campus? What steps are we taking to embrace the Black Lives Matter movement? Before we get to actually trying to answer that, and I'm thinking maybe Vice President Hughes might want to take that. I wanted to offer the opportunity for our law enforcement professionals and retiree, if they choose, to unmute themselves and pop in and just say Black Lives Matter, since that was a challenge that Marckel issued. I didn't want that to go unmet.
I have no problem saying Black Lives Matter. One of the reasons I stayed in law enforcement was because I understood that change starts at the top. I had the opportunity to make substantially more money in the civilian world. And I just want to circle back, if I could, 1 minute, to talk about when the question was asked of Dean Hughes about what should you do to encounter the police. And I want you to know that if you feel that something didn't go wrong, please, every agency has an internal affairs department, and the internal affairs work directly for the chief. And I will tell you right now, if you make any complaint to the internal affairs department, it will be reviewed and you will get a response. You may not like the response, but you will get a response and will get a good look. Don't try to litigate it on the street. Please, please, please. I tell everyone, bring it, report it, and it will be investigated. And I can tell you in Newport News, whether it's at the police department, the sheriff's office, or CNU, because I've been involved in those, at least one or two at CNU, it will be reviewed. Okay, that's it.
Chief Dan?
Yes, of course, Black Lives Matter. And, you know, I'm looking forward to listening more. We do have a robust, well, at least we would love to have a more robust engagement. We're very small and our resources are challenged, but we do a lot with what we have. We do engage with the community. And I would like to point out, every police department needs to be representative of their community. We are absolutely representative, our makeup of the community, as well as the greater Newport News community. We're approximately 67% multicultural here, and I'm not sure people realize that. I think it's very, very important as far as recruitment efforts go, as far as representing your community. You must be representative of your community. Every police department must be. That has to happen. So we have a community engagement officer, that is Sergeant Sanders. And we do our best to engage at a level throughout the year. COVID's been tough, but prior to that, we do have a relationship with the Student Safety Committee, or I'm sorry, the Student Government Association, in forming a Student Safety Committee, just to talk about innovation and partnerships and problem solving and that sort of thing. We do have relationship with other partners in the community, Newport News Social Services, United Way, Day of Caring for food drives, the Virginia Peninsula Food Bank. They're small things, but they're big to us. We are here to listen. And again, it's so upsetting that that the police are not trusted, and I want to earn that. I want to earn that, and I'm here to listen. And if I can't earn that, then I'm not doing my job.
Thanks, Chief Dan. Chief Steve, did you want to pop in right quick?
I did, and I'll be quick. And certainly Black Lives Matter. I tell you, the Newport News serves this whole community, right? And Blakely and Marcel, I'll tell you, the conversations we've had. I don't think it's just something, Marcel. I don't think it's just something we can say.
No.
Right? It's not just words. I lost 8 pounds on demonstrations and walks this summer. I want you to know that, my friend. 8 pounds walking, and I think that you have a lot of interaction, a lot of good conversations, participating, and I even saw officers that started to do that as we got more into the summer. So I appreciate those opportunities and those conversations, but it's got to be more than words, right? It has to be actions and what we display and show. So I just want to I didn't mean to take up too much time.
That's all right. Thank you so much. I see that we are actually at 8:07. I'm going to aim to stop at 8:10 if that's okay with event support. I'm assuming I'm getting a nod, yes. I do want to try to take a couple more of the prepared questions or the pre-submitted questions. There are so many, it looks like we are going to need a follow-up session. So I'm thinking of maybe scheduling a diversity deep dive to go a little bit deeper on some of the provocative topics that have been raised.
I have one thing, if you don't mind.
I'm sorry, what?
I have one thing, if you don't mind.
Could you hold it just for a moment so we can honor the questions that were submitted though, please?
It's a submitted question.
It is? Go for it.
Someone asked, what can they do as a white student to help their students, their fellow friends of color in the fight? And what I wanted to say was, as a white person in general, one thing you need to do is acknowledge your privilege, right? It's very real. And in that privilege, I would ask you to educate yourself. Don't expect someone to tell you everything that you need to know. Like, go out there and look for the answers yourself. And then as you educate yourself on the topic, I would ask that you just educate your other fellow white cohorts, just to put it into perspective for them that we can care to. That's all.
Okay. Thank you, Marcel. So I'm going to switch from the pre-submitted questions for the last couple minutes to the questions that have come in the Q&A box. Obviously, we're not going to get to all of them. And there's one that I think I just said that I was going to answer live that I meant to type an answer to, and it was something about the law enforcement officers not needing to be prompted to say the right thing. And I do want to let everybody know that the structure of the event was I crafted questions and sent them out, and so they prepared remarks to those questions. So, when the challenge came at the end from Marcel saying, they didn't say Black Lives Matter, I wanted to give them the chance to do that. So that was, strictly on the programming. I don't think there's anybody on this panel who wouldn't say that quickly and easily and who doesn't believe it. These are all people that I consider friends and definitely friends of Christopher Newport University. And the purpose of this event was to ensure that parents and students and CNU community members could feel safe and knew that they were respected. Let's see, so I'm gonna go up and grab. Okay, so somebody is looking for contact information for Blakely, Marcel, and there's a bunch of questions coming at the same time, and so now it's moving, but Blakely, Marcel, and Marlon, if you want to put contact information, maybe in the Q&A, or we can try to provide it after the fact. That is being requested. Let's see. I got comments. How can CNU create more spaces for support for the Black students that feel alienated by the environment of this campus? I guess we're talking about physical spaces there, and I am not really sure. Maybe Kevin, and actually I know I had invited Kevin in on the Black Lives Matter question. Maybe Kevin, do you have anything to add about the spaces question?
So if the question is about physical space, then we need to identify what that could look like, right? There are spaces on campus, but we treat them generically as programming spaces. And if you haven't, if you're not listening to what our students are saying, it's what we were doing isn't enough. We need a more targeted, more focused approach. I mean, I lumped I apologize to Marlon and Marckel because they're alums now, but that's part of the message that they're sending to us. And certainly the efforts that Blakely made this summer is also another indicator that doing what we were doing and saying, well, here it's available isn't enough. There needs to be a proactive step in order to address this. So if there are spaces that people are looking for, please help me know what some of those things may be so I can work to make that happen. I can't tell you that I know what all the spaces are on campus, but that's from a physical standpoint. I think there's another element to space, and I don't want to take up too much time here, but I think some of it is having entree, and to their credit, you know, and I'm thinking about Marckel and what he did when he was a student here in his last year and what Blakely's doing now. They're forcing entree because it needed to be forced, right? And they're asking, demanding, pointing at, holding up a mirror and saying, we can't keep forcing it. You need to make this happen with us. Not for us, but with us. That's part of the issue. And so if it's that type of space we're talking about, I think what I have heard from not just the Black Lives Matter movement nationally, but what we are hearing on our campus is this is an us issue, and stop making it about Black individuals. It's an us issue. And if we're not getting that, we're continuing to be part of the problem. So kind of went down a bunny trail there, but anyway, that's what I think we need to do.
That's okay. Thank you. Thank you. Dr. Gagnon, one of the questions that has come up is, what is CNU doing to combat racial injustices inside and outside of our community?
What I would say, listening and especially listening to our students and our previous students, it's very eye-opening to hear your perspectives, and I value those perspectives. And what I would say is that I think all of us here on this panel are here because we feel passionately about these issues. Certainly I am. I've dedicated a great deal of my life and my career to issues of social justice, whether those are racial issues or gender issues or sexual orientation issues. And so what we can do, where we can engage on campus, or how we can make things better on campus, I will go back to that notion of having conversations, because Marckel mentioned that there's conversations that are had in certain organizations, but it doesn't help us if a conversation is had in a Black student union and the white students or the other students are not there to hear that discourse. We need to hear that discourse. And so I think one of the ways that we have to engage on campus, and I think Kevin Hughes said this as well, it's not a Black problem or a white problem or a female problem or whatever. It's our problem. It's our problem on CNU. And I think the ways that we engage is by surrounding one another and coming together and listening and supporting and hearing what people have to say. And that, I think, is started in forums like this, but I think we have a long, long way to go.
Thank you so much, Elizabeth. We have a lot of questions that have come in. And I don't know that we're going to be able to address all of them in, it's 8:15 now. I've gotten permission to go another few minutes. I'm going to commit right now, because we do have a couple minutes of wrap up things to do. I'm going to commit right now that we need to have a part 2. We need to have a diversity deep dive, if you will, and continue the conversation, specifically addressing all of the comments and questions that have come in that are not going to get addressed right now tonight. I have my Q&A up. Who was calling me? Sheriff Gabe. Yes, sir. Come on in.
I just wanted to quickly say that also, one of the things that I think is helping to prompt change is a focus that the board of visitors has on that climate on CNU. I will tell you that I'm probably in my 7th year on the board right now. And over the last 2 years, I would say we have started to see some real momentum And that's because we are pushing from the board side. We're asking the critical questions. We're asking the questions about equal pay for female professors and male professors. We're talking about, you know, a lot of the aspects that the students and alums are raising. And the Diversity Council, the Dr. Spranger being appointed, that's been in the making. You know, I know the timing looks like it's right now, but that's been in the making. That's been something that we've been saying needs to happen. We talked about the fact that there's a lot of representation on the classified level, the groundskeepers, the cafeteria workers, but at the professional level, it's not there. And Dean Hughes knows. I've been very vocal, and I will tell you that as long as I'm on the board, I will continue to commit to push those issues. And that's a lot of times where the real change begins, because it comes from the board and then it becomes a focus. So we need the students, the community to continue to push, and we need the board to continue to push. And we will meet somewhere in the middle, and not everyone will get everything they want. But I am telling you, I've seen the community captains program, and that's deliberate to try to bring students of color or create a pathway, which was spoken to earlier. And I'm just telling you that I appreciate what you guys are saying and doing. Don't let up. And you have our commitment also, those that are on the board that I may influence, to ensure that we continue to push to make a lot of this reality.
Thank you so much, Sheriff Gabe. So you guys, we have done a good thing here, and I choose to stay with that thought. There have been some criticisms. There have been some statements that were made that we could address and correct and provide some information that might change some perspectives. But we've got to do a part two. We've just got to do that so we can honor not only the structure that we created for tonight, but also so that we can honor all of these wonderful comments and questions that have come in. So we're just going to have to get that set up, and we'll get word out to everybody who registered for tonight. And of course, we'll publicize it widely, and who knows, maybe even more people will join in. But we do want to stick with, you know, the structure. I'm loving this momentum. Thank you so much.
Dr. Spranger,
closing comments, sir?
Do you know if President Tribble tuned in tonight?
I do not, but we'll be able to find out. I understood that that was the plan, but I can't see all of the folks who signed in. So I guess just with closing thoughts, I'm going to turn the floor back over to Amy Dale and our event support staff. This has been probably as exciting for everybody else as it has been for me, and so I'm sure all of our panelists will let me know if they're willing to engage in our deep dive. But what I want to do is set up a deep dive to follow up on some of these issues, primarily the issues that have been raised in questions and comments. So we're going to save the Q&A and definitely address those, okay? Again, there are some that we could talk about now, but we kind of need to go ahead and wrap up. So thank you to every one of the panelists. Thank you to all of our professionals, our alumni, our student. And I heard you, so maybe next time I'll have more than one student, but I did make a promise not to have 10 panelists again. Thank you to everyone who engaged with us tonight. And I'm gonna hand the mic over to Amy Dale. Thank you so much.
All right, so before we go today, we did want to share with you the list of upcoming sessions, because while we're going to do a deep dive on this topic at another point, there are a number of other upcoming sessions and topics that are going to be covered. So spread the word. If you're interested, mark these dates upcoming for the fall semester, and then look ahead for these other topics, because we want to make sure, Angela wants to make sure that we have a broad representation of issues that we're tackling and covering and diving into. This is a big one, but it's not the only one. We can do good work if we work together. So thank you all so much for joining us this evening. And we will be in touch. Please look out for that survey that Angela is going to send after, and have a wonderful evening. Good night.